Hi, welcome to the Triheart podcast, episode 13. Today we are joined by striking worker of Good Vibrations and member of SEXY, Solidarity with East Coast Sex Educators, Aria Carpenter, with featured music by Sam Mulligan. The following is quoted from the 9/3 Boston Compass interview, I'm with SEXY, an interview with the organizers of Boston Sex Educator Strikes, by Alison LaFrance. Good Vibrations, established in 1977 as a trailblazing sex toy retailer with the goal to create well-lit and accessible alternative adult bookstore spaces for the community, is now under fire from employees of its Boston locations. The sex educators sales associates from the Brooklyn and Harvard Square store have organized under the collective Solidarity with East Coast Sex Educators, SEXY, to demand better communication from upper management that is headquartered on the West Coast. Back in May, when Good Vibrations was beginning its process of reopening amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, employees only found out via social media and were not consulted about safety policies, despite the fact that they would be the ones enforcing these measures. Many of the group's demands predate COVID, but were exacerbated by the fact that employees are now risking their lives by working on the floor. On August 15th, workers of Good Vibrations East Coast announced a strike when demands were dismissed by management.
Yeah. This song's important. Something I've been thinking about lately. Been thinking a lot. I think it's worth talking about. Let me tell you what I could do if I really, really wanted to. Ain't nobody stopping me, 'cause I'm an adult. Yeah. And I can eat pizza every day. I can eat pizza every day. Yeah. I can eat pizza every day if I really want to. Walking down the street, almost time to eat. A rumble grumble in my tummy, quickness in my feet. A scent swoops in, that smells nice. Hit the pizzeria up, 'cause I'm looking for a bite. Grab a hot slice, then a jump on my bike. I never met a pizza pie that I didn't like. Get the chorizo, pepperonis loaded up, extra cheesy, don't be stingy, please. It's okay if it's greasy, just load it up. Cook it up, quick as can be. I need some in my belly, ASAP. Big thanks go to the delivery folk, driving those pies up those slippery slopes. Triangle shaped mansion on the top of a hill. Yellow paint, brown trim, pizza sauce for themselves. How about that cheese? How about that sauce? Delicious and nutritious at a reasonable cost. I can eat pizza every day. I can eat pizza every day. I can eat pizza every day. And I really want to. You know I do. I can eat pizza every day. I can eat pizza every day. Yeah. I can eat pizza every day for the rest of my life. You got the pie, pizza, pepper, pushing perfect pies prolifically. Sausage, sauteed, sausage, so specifically. Chock full of cheesy chunks, Hawaiian ham, long stem. Perfect pineapple, pork cartoonist. Great gallons of garlic butter, boy, as booty is. Slice some circles or squares, I don't care. 3 to the 65 days a year, what have we here? A lengthy love letter for a flatbread or a dank deep dish. What's better, double, triple tag team, I wish. Can't care less about my cholesterol. Whipped cream pouring like waterfall. I can eat pizza every day. Whipped cream pouring like waterfall. I can eat pizza every day. I can eat pizza every dang day if I want. Yeah, I can eat pizza in the morning, at night, any time of the day that I want to. I should have really do. I can eat pizza and I can eat pizza every day. Yeah, I can eat pizza every day. I'm not gross. You like pizza a lot, I like it the most.
Did you make it to picketing today?
So the store was closed. We've been experiencing a lot of that, a lot of sort of hours shifting suddenly for the shops. And at times it can be very encouraging because, you know, the impact of what we're doing being felt is obviously important. But at the same time, it can be a little bit ominous because in the past, the stores closed for a little bit and then opened up with scabs working with the managers and things like that. So we're sort of trying to cover a few different options for what they're closing for right now. But I believe what I heard was that they basically they had a sign up on the window last week that said they were closed, I think like Sunday to Friday, and which is pretty huge. And they haven't taken down that sign yet, so we'll see.
So just for some foundation stuff, so tell us about yourself. So this is a long one because there's so much. Yourself, the solidarity with East Coast sex educators, and also standing with solidarity with East Coast sex educators.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Aria. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I've been what's called the Sex Educator Sales Associate, SESA, at the company Good Vibrations for a little over 3 years. Now, during that time, my role as a trans feminine person has been very centered around advocacy, and the message that the company sort of sent was that that was something that they wanted, sort of to a point. And definitely this is not the first time I've kind of been a thorn in the side of the business, but at the same time, and I'll get into this a little bit more later, but I believe in holding companies accountable to, if they are going to hire from vulnerable populations, they need to be ready for that. They need to be ready for their voices to be kind of, you know, tempered in the fire, like very kind of strong, powerful, and not willing to be subjugated without a fight. And so we, as a staff, because there are 2 locations on the East Coast, one in Harvard Square and one in Brookline, Coolidge Corner of Massachusetts. Those 2 locations, we used to have, you know, like 10 plus employees across both locations, people who had been here for, you know, 2-3 years, like nearly as long as me. And yet we lost so many of them kind of exiting from kind of amidst the reopening process. We had problems that started far before COVID, but I think for a lot of businesses, including Good Vibrations, COVID didn't necessarily, you know, create these problems from nothing, but they definitely unmasked a lot of businesses who put forth a progressive facade, or at least created conditions in which businesses were incentivized to slash workers' rights. Because, you know, we can't spend money on those things. We can't hire more HR people. We can't afford to come up with a really comprehensive COVID plan. We don't have time to listen to employee concerns about COVID, PPE, things of that nature. Yeah. But what we sort of realized as a staff was that not only is it a huge opportunity for businesses to do that, but it's also a huge opportunity for workers to mobilize their labor power as a group. Because yes, this is a time where a lot of businesses are sort of in danger. I say that because I think a lot of people conflate the danger that workers are in on the job with the dangers that like businesses are in.
Right.
But at the end of the day, like if you lose your investment, if you lose, you know, business, it's very different from the numbers that we're seeing from COVID deaths and COVID cases. And that no matter how many studies come out, no matter how many new information pops up, this is like, oh, well, you know, maybe it's lightening up. Maybe our numbers are reducing. Every single time we see numbers going down in Boston, we see them going up the next day because everybody sees one article go out and then they feel a lot more confident about it. I'm kind of going on a tangent, but
no.
Coming back to it, what we had was a lot of instances of, you know, employees expressing very real concerns, things like, I don't think it's fair that you should be fired upon refusing a recall letter. I don't think you should be glossed over when you make one of the conditions of your recall to the business. Hey, I wish that, touchable testers, floor models in the store, because Good Vibrations, for those of you who don't know, is sort of a sex positive retail shop that's meant to, have floor models of product so you can pick it up, you can see it, touch it, interact with it, and ask questions about it. But unlike a lot of stores, when COVID hit, the policy was sort of just to leave the floor models out as normal and just clean them more often, rather than what we want. What's demand number one of our striking demands is take the floor models behind the counter, make them less available, but provide them to customers when we feel that they might be interested or when they ask for them to be presented. But a lot of these concerns were very, either they purely fell by the wayside and you would, yes, I'm physically able to come back to the store, but I wouldn't feel comfortable until this thing was done. And you would just get the recall letter anyway, and you can't say no. So it doesn't matter that you gave a condition. Things like that. Things like we had a lot of emails, a lot of concerns being sent to human resources, being, ping-ponged among upper management and passed around against confidentiality. We had, and also just customers getting very angry, some belligerent about mask policies, and the company being very unwilling to change things about COVID policy to make these things easier. Just a general lack of sensitivity and empathy during a time where everybody's situations are going to be very different, very unique, depending on where you are in the country, where you are even in the state. And so as we were losing some of our best people, some of our best educators, our best speakers, our best minds, we knew we had to do something. And what started as sort of just passing information between ourselves to make sure that we knew what was going on in our stores as employees, because we were finding out that we were being recalled. I remember it was the 28th, and I saw a post that was made by the company, by one of the California locations, saying that they were opening up one of their locations on the 18th. And I said, oh my God, it's 10 days ago. What's the timetable? So I went to my boss and I was like, hey, what's going on here? And the next day she brought us into a Zoom call and said, yeah, actually we are in the process of opening the stores and you can expect a call about receiving a recall letter within a week. So we needed a way to pass information. We needed a way to communicate and understand what was going on. But that quickly became we need to do something about this as soon as people just started dropping like flies one by one. And it sort of became something beautiful, because what started as a bunch of workers, a bunch of educators, because all of the remaining employees were queer and were trans. Just what started as solidarity and just this deep, fear that we would lose all of these beautiful people to these conditions that are so fixable. And so clearly things that we are asking to do something about, things that we are offering solutions to, that we just don't want to lose all of these people over these conditions when, again, we can get together and we can make it clear that we don't want to accept that. Right. That we would rather see the people we care about and the people we admire stay on the team, stay at this job, have faith in this company. And all it would take is small changes. Yeah. So we had no experience starting out. We just knew we had to take action. And so we created a list of demands. We sent them out. And it was funny because we didn't get any response at all from the company until we applied pressure and said that we would go public, which was funny. They said it was because, it's a weekend. It's not within business hours, as if we've never received an email or a call over the weekend because our stores are open on the weekends. And it just sort of cascaded into this long battle that we've been in for 3 weeks now, presenting solutions, being told that they're not practical solutions, being told that the company needs more time to think and consider, that they don't have enough information, that they don't understand what we're asking for. In the meantime, you have a group of trans and queer people out in the sweltering heat picketing with no pay because the company doesn't understand that we need better COVID protection, better communication from upper management, superior human resources staffing, overdue check-ins and raises, better local resources for management. And if none of those are acceptable, then let us be absorbed into a union, as if those are difficult things to understand.
Right. Just in for like a little context, tell us a little bit about working at Good Vibrations, your duties there, and what does it mean to be a sex educator, and how does that correlate with your position there?
Yeah, so a SESA, a sex educator sales associate, is a trained sales associate who knows a lot of information about sexual health and wellness, pleasure anatomy, product knowledge, market trends, things like that, that you might not otherwise know if you were employed at what a lot of people like to call like shady bookstores. Now, Good Vibrations opened in 1977. It was the store concept was created by a woman named Joni Blank, who was a sex therapist who kind of just noticed that people weren't going to sexual health centers to get their information. They were going to, again, dirty bookstores, buying a toy they knew nothing about from somebody that made them uncomfortable, bringing it home and just hoping they understood it. So the intention of Good Vibes is to be this well-lit, safe place where you can go, you can say, hey, I am queer, I'm trans, I'm postmenopausal, I'm pregnant, I've been on chemo, and I'm looking to, improve my experience with sexual pleasure and health. That we would be there, we would be educated. You have to go through about, I think like 90 collective hours of training or something, though the
Wow.
training has changed over time, the way that they do it. But the kind of long and short of it is that we're a very well-trained staff in sexual health and wellness. Now, what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, if I were to go to work, I would start my shift, clock in, clean some sex toys on the floor models so that people aren't, touching something that's been grabbed 1,000 times that day. Everything's charged, that's very important. Everything's clean, everything's nice. All the light bulbs are installed to make sure you can see every single corner of the store and to make sure I have a headache every single day. And then a customer comes in and we'll greet them, ideally give them a bit of space to get acquainted, and then sort of ask them, what are you looking for? What can I help you with? And someone might say, I'm getting my first vibrator ever. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never been in a place like this. And we would introduce the store, a bit of the mission and everything, and approach it from there. You might offer a range of options, talk about, popularity doesn't necessarily mean what's best for you. We want something that we know is going to work for you. So if you're not sure, maybe something simple, something straightforward, something you can use in a variety of ways, something small, so you're not intimidated by size and shape and things like that. And you dispel myths just one after the other when you do this job. People come in and they say, oh, is a vibrator going to make me numb? And we go, no, especially if you use a bit of lubricant, you're not going to rub your skin raw, but any of that sensation's temporary. Oh, like if I penetrate with a sex toy, am I going to like stretch myself out? It's like, no.
Wow.
In fact, the opposite. Over time, if you don't like stimulate the vagina at all and get the blood flowing, you'll experience atrophy and pain and later in your life, things like that. So it really feels good doing this work. And I want to make that clear, is that every single person who is on strike right now really loves to work at Good Vibes to a certain degree. We love what we do. We were doing dozens and dozens and dozens of workshops as a worker base. We do outreach and workshops. I was doing, at the time when we closed for COVID, because obviously we weren't doing workshop, but before COVID, I was doing workshops for trans feminine and otherwise like DMAB trans people. I was doing workshops on rope bondage, workshops on erotica writing, particularly on how to write monster erotica.
Oh, right, yeah.
Quality stuff. And if I were to rattle off some other workshops that people on the team were doing, things like astrology and dating, things like electrostimulation, public play. A lot of these were original curriculum. We were all super committed in our own special ways to the cause, where if I was trying to become a walking, talking resource for trans people, my coworker might have been a big resource for people who want to educate younger people, like 18-year-old people who are just starting to have conversations about sex and things like that, because it's hard to have those conversations. Even in the store, we can't necessarily, speak to anybody who's under 18 at all. Nobody can come into the store if they're under 18. Other people might be like one of my coworkers was a pelvic floor therapist and had a lot of expertise there. Everybody had all of the rudimentary knowledge that they imparted us with, but then all of this auxiliary knowledge that we came into the job with, that we picked up along the way.
Right.
And we brought so much beauty to the space. And a lot of people who have sort of encountered the picket line in the store are people who recognize us, people who don't, people who are coming in the first time, see us. And I think that what they can tell, and what I think, not only our customers, but I think former workers who have been joining us, workers of other sex positive businesses who have been joining us in solidarity, what they can see is that without the employees, without the sex educators, the space is a bit of just a J.C. Penney for sex toys. It's just a warehouse. It's a big, nice, well decorated shelf of toys. But that the really important part of the experience of Good Vibrations is that you go in, you see people who reflect the marginalized voices and populations that you see in yourself, and you feel welcome. You feel like you belong. You feel like there's a place for you to go where you can walk in and you say, I am X intersectional identity, intersected with X other and Y other and Z other identities. And no one's going to look at you and say, well, maybe Google it. If somebody comes in and they say hey, I have a physical disability, how might I approach sex? Not only are we going to be educating ourselves as employees, we have people on staff who are there to validate and say, yeah, no, it sucks. And
wow.
There's not a lot of information out there, but I've learned a lot myself. Let's chat.
Wow.
So Good Vibrations can be a radical resource when it is not profit driven to the point of putting people at risk. And what we were seeing when we went on strike, and well before, with these, months and months and months long sexual harassment cases where we were being forced to work with people who sexually harassed us, situations where people were receiving, weeks and weeks of wait time between emailing HR and getting a response, or just no response at all.
Yeah.
And when you begin to see this and you begin to see the company sort of, rushing to make Instagram posts, make Facebook posts, update their website to reflect new deals during COVID, but not rushing to send us an email about the status of our jobs,
right.
Send us an email about the status of a coworker you're scared to go back to work with. When those become shelved, when those money is more pressing than morale, even if it's in a time where money is, scarce, and even if we're pretending that the company has nowhere near enough money to, pay us $1 extra to account for cost of living in Massachusetts increasing over time, or, a new HR representative to be in this neck of the woods,
right.
Or let us become a part of a union and raising our wages. Even if we're operating in that framework, it does no favors to the quality of the education and the quality of the experience that you're going to get approaching this space.
1984, we were on our way. What I was looking for, well, I cannot say. I'm not withholding, I just don't know. But it doesn't matter, cause we ended up in limbo, stuck in a time war. It's alright, have no fear. It's kinda dark, the scenery is dark, but I still got a good feeling we'll get out of here. Now it's been a week, I'm thirsty and tired. No wood, no matter, we can't even start a fire in space. Now it's cold, but we're not old, cause in the time warp, mortals do not age. Stuck in a time war, it's alright, have no fear. It's really dark, we can't see any stars, but I still got a good feeling we'll get out of here. Must have been some type of miscommunication. Send a mayday signal back to home station. They can save us, so don't give up hope. See, look, they get back to us right away. Home base, what you got to say?
J446, this is home base. Thank you for your inquiry. I regret to inform you that the system has run through all possible scenarios, and the best course of action is to abandon all hope and prepare for death. Thank you, and have a nice day.
It's time to die, so close your eyes. Put your head between your thighs and kiss them buns goodbye. Stuck in a time warp. Stuck in a time warp. Stuck in a time warp, write a goodbye note. The end is near, I think by now we've all realized everybody dies here.
This kind of reminds me of like a conservative talking point where it's like people who are trying to change the country. It's like, why don't you just move to a different country then? Why are you trying to, put it up in here? So I'll ask you, if it's so bad at Good Vibrations, why not just work at a different store?
These are the people who, it reminds me of when Ben Shapiro said, even if climate change is real and the water levels are rising, why don't the people just sell their houses and move away?
Right.
And it's like, sell to who? Who's going to buy an Atlantean home at the bottom of the sea?
Yeah.
Not to steal too from H. Bomber Guy, but it means nothing. It's an empty platitude. It's an empty sentiment, because what you're doing is you are taking up a cause, you're believing in something, and the moment you get any pushback, the moment you're treated poorly in that space, rather than investigating, wait. This company says it supports trans people.
Yeah.
This company says it supports queer people, but it's just blatantly not. If you're unable to engage in the why, the how, and the what you can do to make this a resource that's actually important. Let me start over. Let me start over with this. We've had a lot of people say to us, well, not a lot, but why don't you just leave the job? A lot of people saying, why don't you just start a new business to compete with Good Vibrations? As if, starting a business right now is a good idea. But what that doesn't consider is the queer and trans people who will then go work in our place.
Right.
Who will start working at Good Vibes after us. It will not do anything to help the people in California who have been anonymously reaching out to us and giving us horrifying testimonials about their treatment, about employees in other shops on the East Coast, on the West Coast, a variety of businesses saying, hey, yeah, sex positive businesses need to be held accountable. And that's the key word here that you're missing when you just ditch it, when you just leave it and focus on yourself and your own experience in times like these, is you dodge accountability, not only for yourself, but for the business itself. Yeah. They are not forced to be held accountable, and they can continue to exploit these vulnerable populations and receive no pushback. And we've seen a lot of this. We've heard of a lot of people saying, I want to resist, I want to stand up, but it's just too much and it's a pandemic and I can't handle this. And that's okay if you don't have capacity for that. I'm not asking everybody to, drag out the guillotines tomorrow, but what I am saying is that businesses are counting on you just leaving. CEOs are counting on just leaving.
Yeah.
They're counting on you, you quit so that they don't fire you and you can't collect unemployment on a baseline.
Right.
But beyond that, you won't then use your labor power as a bargaining chip. So when someone comes up and says, why are you picketing? Why wouldn't you just quit?
Yeah.
I say, because this company can something incredible. Well, not this company, but this store.
Yeah.
On the ground right now. Because what's a brand, what's a company compared to a place, a building where trans people in Brookline, in Massachusetts, in Boston know where they can go, where they will not be judged, where they can say, I wear a Packer, I wear a binder, and nobody will judge them. And if anybody does, they have people on their side. They have an establishment on their side. That is meaningful and that is important. And I would be utterly ashamed of myself if, as a marginalized person, I wasn't working, if I have the energy, if I have the time, if I have the power to put into making sure that resource is available, rather than just saying like, well, I'd rather just work somewhere else anyway. I would be ashamed of myself. I didn't use that power to fight to make that resource available for people in the future.
Yeah.
I would be ashamed of myself if I made future employees vulnerable to those same things that I have been made vulnerable to. Because this isn't just, sketchy labor practices. This isn't just sketchy labor practices. This is, we're peacefully and lawfully picketing outside of the store, and the manager called the cops on us. A bunch of trans, queer, some of whom were sex workers, out on the front line, having a guy with a thin blue line face mask approach them. And thank God he just said, everything here is lawful. Everything here is okay. Everything here is protected under your concerted activity rights, because it could have gone a lot worse.
Right.
And this company, this business has Black Lives Matter signs right in the window, and it doesn't have the self-awareness to recognize the potential violence that they were engaging in, the objective violence that they were engaging in, because not all of the workers, especially not all of our supporters, are white. And a lot of them were deeply hurt and betrayed by this news that picketers had the cops called on them. And to me, if I were to just walk away, if I were to just abandon this and abandon all the people who look up to me right now, I would be leaving people vulnerable to further violence. The United States really encourages us to be, like these entrepreneurial individuals. We're focused on ourselves. I got mine, fuck you, get your own kind of outlooks on this. But if anybody wants to take away anything from what we're doing right now, from the 1,300 signatures that we've got on our petition, 1,300 plus, and the $6,000 plus that we've raised in our strike fund, it's that solidarity is so real, and that communities will come out when their people need them. You just need to ask and be vulnerable and speak to people in a way that emboldens them, because I can't think of a single person right now going to their job who thinks, my business is doing everything it can to protect me, that my business is doing everything it can to protect me. And that, to me, signifies a lot about the value of sharing information amongst ourselves if information channels are so muddied and panicked and despondent right now, of communication, but also financial support, of bodies coming out to buy groceries for each other. You need to believe in your peers, and you would be amiss, you would be in danger and trusting your livelihood purely in the hands of somebody who lives across the country, somebody who drives a Tesla, somebody who's got personal funds put away specifically for COVID shutdowns while you are on the brink of homelessness. You would be so much safer looking around you at the people in your immediate surroundings, because I know no matter how much I could potentially buy into the fact that the owner of this company really empathizes with me as a worker living in Allston, Massachusetts, even if I were to buy into that, he's not going to be the person to save me if a violently transphobic anti-masker comes into the store and decides to spit on my face or overturn
Right.
a planter outside of the store or something,
Yeah.
or smash things around or throw product on the floor. He's not going to be the one who helps me, because there's a power dynamic there. There's a power dynamic where he can afford to be very far away and still make decisions about my day-to-day life. And that is what's important to understand, is that when we were going through the process of negotiations with the owner of this company, he was very determined to say, let's get you some better supervisors, some better administrators, implying that he's going to fire our manager, who's the only person still working in the store, bringing in partners and friends to scab on her behalf. What's clear is an utter lack of awareness, an utter amount of cognitive distance between him in a position of power and us, who are acutely aware that within that power dynamic, I'm not going to ask for help on things that I feel he doesn't agree with, because he has power over my job. If I want to come forward and say, hey, I think it's unacceptable that I have to wait more than 2 months to hear back about an investigation into somebody who's sexually harassing me. I think it's unacceptable that so many of us said we wouldn't come back to work without proper PPE and COVID policies that, match up with what would make me comfortable. And, I digress again, but I guess my point is that it's very important that we as workers understand the power that we have, and to just get up and walk away, put yourself in danger, not have unemployment, things like that. You can do that, but you are squandering a lot of power that you have. And I would encourage any worker who is disgruntled or frustrated or in danger to talk to your coworkers and take their concerns very seriously. Develop solidarity, communicate with each other, because the owner of Good Vibrations and his branding tactics and, the company Instagram and the newsletter aren't what sells products.
Right.
Employees on the ground sell product. Laborers, and it's getting a bit into, the good old red flag, but you have labor, and labor is everything.
Right.
Don't let people steal it from you if you feel threatened and afraid. You can just take it away from them. Your concerns are not unfeasible. It doesn't matter how many, I've heard from so many workers, before COVID, I said I wanted to wear a mask and my boss said that it was fear mongering. This was something that happened to me at my job. This is something that I had a Trader Joe's employee talk to me about. This is another sex positive shop worker that I heard say this. That so many companies are so quick to say, until we have concrete evidence that your life is at risk every single day being in the store, we will not make changes to make you more comfortable.
Yeah.
And that is just despicable.
This is really interesting. I see this a lot too. You go out to a store, so-and-so really cares about their workers. We want to thank our workers, this and this. But tell us a little bit about your experience with the dichotomy, especially someone who, or a shop that sells progressive products and it has a progressive personality, and you said that they had a BLM sign, the most basic of progressive slogans. So tell us a little bit about the dichotomy of this progressive product and personality, but not a progressive business model.
So I'm going to answer this in the best way I can. There's a term that's recently that I've recently sort of educated myself on, which is moral injury. Moral injury is something that is typically talked about in circles discussing PTSD, especially in combat veterans, talking about how and you'll immediately understand where I'm going with this, but you're given a job, you're told that you're going to go do something wonderful, you're going to make a difference, you're going to fight for freedom, you're going to do incredible things that nobody else is brave enough to do, that you're going to be on the front lines of change and justice all across the world. And what do? You go out to the front lines, you kill some innocent people on a botched order, you maybe get maimed, and you endure permanent psychological trauma, and you return home to abysmal treatment of veterans, and you're sitting there saying, oh my God, I committed atrocities.
Yeah.
I committed atrocities, and I was treated like garbage by the company that told me to go do them. And maybe you do something grand. Maybe you're capable of coming home and feeling like you did something incredible. But no matter what, it's not going to be what they told you it was. And that seemingly simple, dissonance really messes people up. And what I'm beginning to realize is we've experienced sort of a small microcosm of that as sex educators at Good Vibrations. Because we come on, we're told, nobody gets the sex education they need growing up. Nobody. Right. We're told there's a penis, there's a vagina, you're separated into separate rooms to talk about them. People with penises, put on a condom. People with vaginas, try your best not to be sexually assaulted. Everybody's told about 1 or 2 STIs. They're incredibly demonized, and you're threatened with pregnancy, and then you go home confused and scared and annoyed, laughing about the big P word. And we experience that, and we hear that, and we go, wow, yeah, that's so important. I came into this job as a fine artist, as a student who had just graduated college. I did printmaking at Lesley University, and I focused on narratives of trans and queer liberation through sexuality, and the idea of, tragic narratives of these identities being presented so frequently in media, so that what trans people sort of approach sexuality with is this sort of pre-defeated feeling of, nobody knows what to do with my body. Everybody's always going to be confused. You get these awful people out there in the world, some of whom are trans, saying, you should be forced to disclose to every partner that you're trans as a barometer of, how willing they are to commit violence against you when they find out, and things like that. And I wanted to replace it with, and it's funny because it's such a parallel with what I'm doing now, with this sense of, you can find a community of people who want to be around you and want to listen to your experiences and talk about how theirs mirror yours, and how between the two of you, you can sort of start to make sense of the gaps in knowledge, in experience, in sort of happiness and empowerment, because you understand in theory that, you are an attractive human being who deserves love and deserves affection and deserves relationships and sex that is empowering and kind and consensual, but you don't really believe it, And then you look at somebody else who's thinking the same thing, and the two of you look at each other and you go, yeah, of course we're wrong. Of course there's this community here. And so I started trying to depict that through images. And so, I walked into the store, into Good Vibrations for the first time, rambled for like an hour about the lack of trans feminine representation in sex ed, and how important it is to exist in sex shops. And the manager at the time, who no longer is the manager, said, you should be paid for this. And it was utterly dreamy. And it was dreamy for every single one of us when we started working here. We are not paid enough to do the amount of work that we do as sex educator sales associates. That's just a given. We are not only selling product, we are not only educating people, we are absolutely playing the role of therapist.
Yeah.
Even if the company says, you shouldn't get into it too much, there's nothing in place to inform customers that that is not something we can sit there and have with them. We're encouraged to give these tailored, empathic experiences to people. Just sit with them and communicate with them. And sure, if somebody comes in and they say, and they just launch into like, it all started when I was 19. And like, no, we stop people and we say like, hey, let's like keep this as like a professional interaction. But, you know, if I'm working with somebody and they say, oh yeah, you know, I just feel like vibrators are never really made with people use like with wheelchair users in mind. And I sit down with them and I go, yeah, you know, it really sucks. And I feel like that would be an easy niche to sort of ask questions of and create products for. And they say, yeah, you know, I've dealt with all this stuff in the past, A, B, C, D, E. I'm not just going to say, stop talking. This isn't relevant to my job as a sex educator. No, we take on a lot of emotional labor as people who are talking about very sensitive subjects with very vulnerable populations in a very sensitive setting. There's no way to avoid it. So we're doing all this extra work that we're not really being compensated for in a way that's incredibly ethical. Yeah. And yet all of us were doing it, and all of us were so happy to be doing it for so long. And all of us were saying like, you know what? We've got this community of educators. We've got all these people who are so with each other, who complement each other's voices, who do good work. And every day you come into work, you know, if even like 3 people come in all day, you had one person who came in and said, I don't know if I need lube. Do I need lube? And you go, well, you know, latex condoms are only lubricated enough to keep them from sticking to themselves in the packaging. Unless it says extra lubricated, it's not enough lubricant to use during play. And they go, oh, and you know you just changed their life. And that little moment is going to give them like really beautiful experiences to come.
Yes.
And it's something magical, but what you start to realize over time, what I realized was that even if I was hired as a trans woman, I was brought on to serve a purpose. And what that was to be tokenized. Oh. Because I provide this very unique role of being a resource to trans femme people that doesn't exist elsewhere on staff. But here's the thing. I'm the only one who knew that stuff. There was no incentive in the education program to teach employees these specific facts about trans women's bodies, about DMAB bodies in general. I offered to give trainings, nothing. I worked as a brand ambassador for a time for the company, actually. In fact, a few people might remember me under the stage name Ms. Rocket, which is a play on the name Rocket in Her Pocket, which is my Instagram handle. And it's meant to be an unabashedly trans feminine character who's loud, who's noisy. I'm throwing dildos around and talking very sort of excitedly about sex toys. And within like a week and a half of us going on strike, they took all the videos down, I believe. Oh. I believe you just can't find them anymore. And I had to fight so long at that business to get us to carry literally any products for trans femme people. And my victory was we carried 2 types of gaffs, so underwear for tucking for people who want to, and breast forms that were a transfer from another location that were in like 3 sizes, like $100 each, and in 1 skin tone. And I was just constantly told, you know, like, there's nobody out here who sells these products. You know, we're not sure where to get them. You know, there's this long vetting process and things like that. But at the end of the day, the gap in the inventory of books that are about trans femme people, of products meant for us, shows something about what the company is willing to dedicate to really making me feel welcome in the space. So by having me there, they can own up to their promise on making the space accessible to DMAB trans folks, but that privilege doesn't extend to me.
Right.
Other than they're giving me a job. And they're, you know, how kind of them, like, to respect my pronouns and not turn me away for being trans and, all of that. How kind of them to do the basic humane thing and consider that sufficient. Because now what we're seeing is not just with trans folks, but with, again, all these other marginalized populations, you're seeing the company go full mask off and just full, like, screw your identity. Like, we're going to go out of business if we don't cut corners.
Right.
All of these things we said before about, like, we don't have time to deal with your concerns around sexual harassment and COVID safety and things like that, around like transphobic language and things like that. It's just not that important. And I think the moment that really sort of solidified in my mind was, and I've been using this acronym a bit, and I want to say that it's okay to not know what it means. I would assume that anybody who wants to be an ally to trans people would just use that special google.com website and figure it out. But in an email at one point to the company, I in passing used the acronym DMAB, designated male at birth. I said DMAB, and I was asked by administration not to use confusing acronyms.
Really? Wow.
And that to me was the moment where I thought, oh, they don't even care enough about me to Google it.
Yeah.
They don't care enough about a marginalized population to learn their terminology. They only care enough to employ them, use the right pronouns, and that's that. And sometimes that's even a stretch for some of our non-binary employees who often get misgendered in emails. But point being that it's very profitable right now in a very attention-based economy to put out a progressive image, to put up the signs in the window. They've got a trans flag in the window. They've got a Philly pride flag. They've got Black Lives Matter signs all up in the window without any actual action, without any accountability being behind those symbols. So we need to be skeptical, not only as consumers, but as workers, of these companies and their willingness to do that. Now, there's a reason why, some people say there's no ethical consumption under capitalism, basically being that you can never predict what sort of shady, awful, exploitative things that a business gets into. It's sort of just the nature of a for-profit economy, of capitalism in general. But what you can do is be aware of where the priorities of businesses like this lie, and be aware of what you can do to hold them accountable. So in the instance of something like, Chick-fil-A, you might boycott them.
Right.
In the case of Good Vibrations, you might boost our voice, join the picket line, like donate to a strike fund, sign our petition, something like that. But even in your workplace, in your local shops, you need to be vigilant of whether or not those companies are really owning up to it, because allyship can't end when the person being considered isn't paying for products.
Yes.
Allyship shouldn't end when an employee asks for a living wage. The act of, people think of violence. People think of violence and they think of, punching, stabbing, shooting, stuff like that. They don't think of an old cis white guy saying to a staff of trans workers during a pandemic, I just don't think that a union is necessary. I just don't think that these are problems we can afford to take care of. I just don't see the point in meeting your demands in this way.
Right.
To a group of people who have been out here with no pay for 3 weeks. That's an act of violence. That he doesn't understand that by doing that, he is threatening our lives and our livelihoods.
Are you referring to, is this Joel or is this someone else that you're referring to?
This is Joel Kaminsky, the
Okay.
owner of Good Vibrations and of Babeland, another chain of shops. He has generally just given us nothing but non-answers and platitudes. What little he has agreed to has been along the lines of, I'll give you a different floor model policy that still keeps the floor models out on the floor. I'll give you a new supervisor, and I'll give you cost of living adjustments 2 weeks after you come back to work. And that's it. Still, leaving out on the floor that there are 70 employees in the company, nearly 12 locations on 2 coasts with 1 human resources representative, that so many of us learned about our recall via social media.
Yeah.
There are things that are just absolutely getting swept aside. And it's violent when this is people's safety. People might not consider it violence to call the cops on a bunch of marginalized strikers.
Right.
But it is. And this is violence that has persisted through the history of the United States and far beyond the United States. Of, you know, people don't think it's violence until they see physical violence happen upon these people. And in the case of something like that person in the store who was screamed at and had a planter overturned, and have the company say like, yeah, well, you know, it could have been worse. You could have de-escalated more. Like, yeah, to what point?
Right.
What would have had to happen for you to sit down with somebody and say, that's horrible. Close the store up early. Take some time for yourself. I'm so sorry. Is there anything that I can do to make you feel safer? Do you need a plexi shield up in front of the register? Is there anything that we can do? What would have needed to happen? Because it seems that the clear answer is physical violence. And we as people need to understand that inaction, when it comes to workers' rights, especially during such life-threatening times, that inaction is complicit with violence against marginalized people. Business owners that don't make the changes their workers are asking for, businesses that don't put the money in to make workers safe right now, whether that's, you know, not just like opening up all of your location and recalling all of your employees at once, you know, putting out patio dining where all the tables are like 3 inches from each other.
Yeah.
Having, you know, we didn't just open one location, we opened both of them. We didn't just open for curbside, we opened for browsing. These were all decisions that were made quickly and without much consideration for what we were saying we felt would be safest.
Yeah.
And that is a violent act when our lives are on the line, especially when you've got a bunch of immunocompromised people. Like,
Raised her cake. I'll skip its funeral and forget the wake. Honor thy life,
Cherish thy death. Make haste. Lay waste to dozens and 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 dozens, dozens and 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 dozens. Eviscerating, masticating. Time is wasting, no time for tasting. I take a dozen and I grab it down my gullet, 'cause you know I want business like the pride of a bullet. Jelly stains around that remains. Jelly stains around that remains. We are the donut slayers, venture into our lair. You'll show when you discover 1,000 souls of donut holes. We are the donut slayers, we capture scent in the air. Seconds pass, you will not find a single crumb left behind. Dozens and 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 dozens, dozens and 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 dozens, dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens.
Here, let me read you this. This is a quote from Mission Local, which is, I think it's a San Franciscan news outlet.
Yeah.
And then this is about Joni Blank when she died in 2016. So the article reads, the business went from a worker-owned co-op to a traditional company in 2006 and was sold to adult product distributor GVA TWN in 2007 to stave off death from internet giants like Amazon, which could deliver sexual products to people's doors without the overhead of a brick and mortar location. A year later, it was sold to Joel Kaminsky, who was a top executive at GVA TWN before leaving to focus full-time on Good Vibrations. It's now solely owned by Kaminsky, with top longtime staff serving as top executives. So my question is, who is Joni Blank and who is Joel Kaminsky, and what's the difference between the two?
So you've got to understand that Joni Blank is regarded as a bit of a mythical figure to a lot of the younger staff. This sort of pioneer who, along with the likes of people like Susie Bright and all these other people who led the way for sex-positive movements to create accessible places for especially women at the time. And that would be one narrative I'd want to inject into it, is that a lot of people come into the stores and say, you know, I'm so happy that this woman-owned business is here. It's not a woman-owned business.
Right.
It hasn't been for a long time, as you can tell from the article. And I think that what we're seeing is this transformation from, like you said, like a co-op of people based in these workshops of a bunch of people sitting on yoga mats using magic wands in someone's living room as a way of educating them.
Right.
It went from this movement of, you know, like people who are scared to say the word vagina out loud, finding a place where they could really talk to people who are dealing with the same stigma, the same fear as them, the same lack of education. And what it's transformed into is a space where, you know, not much has changed about the branding of the company, despite the fact that the climate it exists in has changed a lot, which there's a word for that. And I believe it is the tendency to come off as a turfy company, one that doesn't really include a lot of really, really prevalent conversations about trans femme people, unless, again, there's a trans femme person present, and one which employs a lot of people who don't really feel connected to that original core group of employees as those employees themselves do. So we know about the original few co-op people because they're a lot of the people who have perpetuated a lot of the actions we're coming forward about. These are people who we have an HR crisis and they send somebody who is not human resources over to the East Coast to take care of it. And, you know, they talk like this person is human resources. Their job title is not.
Right.
You can feel this undercurrent as emails are being passed around against confidentiality that's promised to us, that they're all friends out there. that they're all on the same page. It's sort of in a few of our chants on the picket line, we use the phrase, we don't want to get sick. We don't need corporate cliques.
Yeah.
Because that's what it feels like. It feels like a group of people who once existed in this very radical, anti-capitalist, sex-positive space and are now running a business where the majority of their job is talking down to the workers and telling them that the concerns they have are not big enough concerns to warrant a visit from HR, are not big enough concerns to warrant an immediate action, and they should just learn to email the right people the first time, say the right words the first time, and not talk about it again.
Yeah.
And I don't know what role Joel has in that circle, but he certainly doesn't have the demeanor of somebody who wants to step outside of it and create these genuine pathways of communication to employees. Because he's visited the stores, I don't know, like 2 times in the 3 years that I had worked there. And both times, he had his Bluetooth earpiece in. He would talk to us for a few minutes at a time. He would have these long conversations with the assistant managers, but that was about it. And then he wants to come to us during the strike and say, if you have a problem, you can email me directly. As if power dynamics that exist in the space make that possible. So Joel Kaminsky, on Twitter at least, says that he's the dumbest guy in the company. And a lot of people would laugh and say, guess he is, but he's not. And I think that this is a very insidious pattern of misogyny that I think a lot of us can pick up on, which is men with power, particularly cis white men with power, donning this moniker of stupidity, of dumbness, in order to excuse horrible behavior, in order to excuse constant mistakes and a lack of awareness and understanding of the needs of the people around them. Because, if femmes say that they're stupid, they're going to be labeled as like this weird stereotype of like a dumb blonde, where, you're just useless and airy and people need to take care of you. Whereas dumb men can frame their power as something they just stumbled into, rather than something that they had to fight and scrape and step on others to get. The Joel Kaminsky can very easily frame himself as, I'm the progressive CEO. I could have made money at this big company, but I decided to go with something that was better for the community, while he's making how many times the wage of his employees,
Right.
A wage that is already below living wage, that is not changing at all during a crisis the likes of which we've never seen before as a human population. And he's still going to continue to pretend that this is a position that, he got by accident. He's just this dumb guy, how am I in charge of all these very smart people? Well, because to not fire strikers, because then you have to pay them unemployment. Not to respond to them immediately, because there's a chance that they'll just go back to work. Not to give them the union, because then you have to pay more money to give them more protection. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
All of these CEOs know what they're doing. And they're going to try to look dumb. They're going to try to look friendly. They're going to try to look like your dad at the barbecue, but they're not. They're not. They're allowing these things to happen. They're the reason these things are happening. If you wanted to make a difference in your community, Joel, pay trans and queer people a living wage. If you want to make a difference in your community, I don't know, make a nonprofit.
Yeah.
Let your employees join a union.
So what is, like, in your point of view, like, what is Joel Kaminsky doing? Like, if Joel Kaminsky is trying to follow his agenda, what is that? What is that agenda?
So we really thought as a staff that when the Retail and Wholesale Department Stores Union came to us and said, hey, Babeland, another business under the umbrella company owned by Joel, which is Barnaby Limited is the name of the company, they're already unionized. And they have a contract very similar to yours. How about you go back to work tomorrow if Joel agrees to recognize you as part of a union? You scrap all your demands and just say, hey, recognize us as part of a union. We'll come back to work tomorrow, cards signed. We don't need another HR person right now because we have a union representative to advocate for us. We don't need, cost of living adjustments because they would raise wages anyway to account for dues of the union. We really thought that was going to be Joel's, that we were doing him a favor.
That sounds good. I would take that deal.
That we were ending this as soon as possible before we'd done much damage to the reputation of the company, before we'd exposed too much about their horrific practices that we have learned about in the process of this. We really thought that he was going to see that as an opportunity for him to stand with his workers without bringing too much else to the fire amidst the social media campaign in particular. Just flat out refused it and just flat out said no. His reasoning being, this contract with Babeland was in when I acquired the company. I didn't write the contract. He said, the people who made the Babeland contract, they didn't have the best of intentions. Vague things like this. As if we're children, as if we don't understand the role of unions in the workplace, as if it's this weird, mysterious thing that we would be giving up our safety to. No, we know how a union functions. We know that if one of us is given the role of shop steward, that we will immediately have more power in the workplace to enforce our own boundaries and make it clear that we won't be scolded behind closed doors without a union member present, that we won't be waiting for weeks on human resources correspondence, and that we won't tolerate unacceptable behavior for months and months and months at a time. The only thing I can imagine is at stake here for him is his reputation as a business owner. The same reason why every business owner doesn't want a union in the workplace is you have to pay more money. You have to give your employees more power to make decisions in the workplace, and you got to meet every week with a union. Boo-hoo. But that's a bit speculative. What I would say is definitely what he's doing right now is he is stalling until we lose all of our money, our lives are at risk, and we are forced to abandon the strike, which, thanks to the generosity of our community, is not something that is happening.
Right.
Our community has made it abundantly clear, not only with local organizations who have come out for us in waves, with the DSA, with Emergency Workers Organizing Committee, with Pride at Work, all these wonderful people coming out to support us, but just everyday people donating to our cause. I had someone on the picket line listen to my, a person who was approaching the store and listening to us say, "Oh my God, this is horrible. I'm going to go home and donate $100 to your strike fund. But in the meantime, here's everything in my wallet. Take it."
Wow, I love
Give me
that.
a handful of cash to distribute among the workers.
Yeah.
People want to keep us out here fighting.
Right.
Even older folks of the community whom we love and support when we work at Good Vibes, is a lot of older folks don't expect sex educators to interact a lot with seniors. We do frequently.
Yeah.
And we have a set of skills for working with them. And a lot of them see us strike and know what's going on. They understand that this is workers standing up to tyrants who are just totally lording over their livelihood and their safety from miles and miles and miles and miles and miles away with no repercussions. If I were to take a guess what his agenda is right now, leave us out and find our replacements. Scab until we're gone. He wants to just pretend this social media campaign never existed. The business hasn't released any public statement. They're just continuing to post deals online, workshops they're doing, just as if nothing's happening. They closed down their Instagram comments and mentions. Like I said, they took down my videos. They are trying their best to pretend that our voices are utterly noiseless, that we are invisible in our physical action. And I don't know why they think that works. I don't know why he thinks that's a good idea, because especially the queer community is loud and proud about holding CEOs accountable, but it's what he's doing.
running around in the woods. My pack full of survival goods. Not even sure if I should be out here looking for him at all. In my homemade furry pants, I do a little happy dance. Cause I got a chance to find out where he's hiding. Are you in the trees? Could you be under this rock? I'm eternally looking for Sasquatch. I've invested a lot of time, all on my own dime. So could you give me a sign if you're out there? Hey, look at that. Get in close and get a Snapchat. That's definitely Sasquatch crap, which means we're hot on the trail. Are you in the trees? Could you be under this rock? I'm eternally looking for Sasquatch. The longest game of hide and seek that I've ever lost. Wherever you may be, one thing's for sure, you got a pretty good hiding spot. Sasquatch, where are you? Gonna get you. In all my years looking for Sasquatch, I never found a single piece of physical evidence. No hair, no poop, no footprints. I got no video, got no audio, I got a whole lot of nothing. But you know what I did find? A little part of myself. And I also got a lot of hiking in, so that was nice. Totally worth it. Keychain. Are you in the trees? Could you be under this rock? I'm eternally looking for Sasquatch. I'll always be looking. I'll never give up. Oh no, you know what? After all, I think I might give up.
One thing I wanted to ask you was based off a couple episodes ago, I was talking to a queer online sex worker and influencer, Little
Yeah, I
Sun
saw
Boy.
that.
Yeah. Oh, did you listen? Oh my God. He's
Yeah,
amazing.
I listened to that episode. It's phenomenal. Yeah.
He's
Go ahead.
amazing. Yeah. So he was saying, like, I forget exactly contextually where he said this, but he was like, oh, people ask me, like, oh, are your parents embarrassed about who you are and what you do? And like, what he brought up was like, immediately in that question, you're acknowledging that what I am is bad and what I'm doing is bad. So do you find that to be a stigma, and do you find that stigma to affect your organizing and unionization and the strike?
Oh yeah. So a very common sort of prejudice that people have against queer people, particularly trans people, particularly DMAB trans people, is the idea that we're too noisy, we're too loud, we talk too much, we're too preachy, we're going on and on and on constantly about how we're victims and everything. And this was something I even faced in the workplace. I had two different supervisors tell me, whilst advocating for people who asked me to speak on their behalf, whilst advocating for trans people as a whole within my workspace to people who are not trans in supervising roles, I was told, you speak for people very often. I don't think you can speak on behalf of all trans people. I don't think you can speak on behalf of all people and all of your peers. I think a lot of people are very willing to, see somebody with dyed hair and facial piercings and think, everything they're making noise about is useless. But even despite that, the community, particularly in Boston, has made it abundantly clear that they're with us. And that early on in this process, I was told by a few people that, you know, like, you don't have a whole lot of people on your team, you know, compared to some bigger strikes that we've seen. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. And I remember even back then thinking, you'll see. You'll see. And when we went public with this, it just exploded because I knew from the beginning that the communities I had found myself in would see that and just want so badly to protect me and my peers, to protect us from these forces that any queer person, any trans person, you look at Stonewall, you look at the AIDS crisis, just generations upon generations of trans and queer people seeing trouble, seeing cops descend on drag queens, seeing an administration looking the other way amidst mass deaths. They see that and they say, I am not going to be quiet. I am not going to sit down. And it is because we have seen this in the past. We have seen people suffer when people are complicit in this kind of behavior.
Yeah.
We don't have too many people coming out and aligning themselves against what we're doing. But, you know, we had somebody who was like writing, you know, like fraudulent, like Yelp reviews trying to claim that we were targetedly harassing queer people. And they're like, oh, you know, this is to be expected from a queer run business.
Wow.
As if all of the employees aren't trans and queer. And, you know, you were talking about parents. I mean, I remember telling my parents and they were like, oh my God, I'm worried about you, but you're doing good work. And I'm so grateful to have family that supports me in that. Because again, I think businesses are going to try and treat us like we're stupid.
Yeah.
And we don't know about the long history of labor rights, that we owe child labor laws, that we owe our current, the size of our work weeks and weekends and Labor Day and everything to loud workers movement. People who made noise didn't take no's from the bosses and made it clear that they could count on the community. Like I said earlier, they wanted to put their lives in the hands of their community rather than in the hands of their bosses. And that's what I would like. There's a term that's used frequently in queer communities called chosen family. It's such a poignant thing. It's such a poignant thing because if there were people out there looking at the Boston Hassle article that just came out about my interview.
Was that you? I wasn't sure who that was. That was you?
That was me.
Wow. Oh, I love that.
Oh, come on. You didn't see my lovely picture? But I guess you didn't know what I looked like before this moment. But point being, like, I know that there are going to be people out there who see that article, who hear this podcast, you know, see pictures of the picket and think, oh, you know, those queers are acting up again. Like, oh, this is bound to happen when it comes to these people. You know, like they're never satisfied.
Right.
So many people, you know, we were referencing like reactionary talking points and things like that. How many people are like, you can be whatever you want to be, but don't promote this, like, don't push this ideology on people. They're trying to make our kids transgender. They're trying to force kids onto hormones and stuff. And it's like, talk to a trans person.
Right.
Talk to a trans person, because your fears that people are going to go on hormones and regret it. No one's forcing kids onto hormones. That's just ridiculous. But the scare tactics of trans people going on hormones and then like detransitioning afterward, it happens, but abundantly is not the case. That abundantly people are so happy that they have access to it, that they get the chance. That has such a vein through everything that we're doing, that if you talk to a queer person, if you talk to a trans person, this whole ideology that you're imagining up, this sort of, you know, the queer agenda, like all of these things, they don't exist.
Right.
We're workers who wants rights just like everybody else. We wear our masks to go to the store and buy our boxed mac and cheese just like everybody else. And yet, what we do have is this beautiful community of people where if we're going to be ostracized by so much of the world, and like you look at our tragic rates of suicide among trans people who aren't allowed to express themselves or go on hormones and things like that, despite everything, we are with each other and we are supporting each other and making one another feel so loved and supported all the way. So something like this, something like solidarity amidst workers' rights struggles during a pandemic, is a no-brainer that we would be there for each other.
Right.
And of course, there's going to be queer people who don't support a movement like this. Obviously, we've got scabs rolling in and out of the store. We've got trans people scabbing for the stores and everything. It's not like there's this universal experience of transness. There's also, hopefully, a sense of awareness among marginalized people that solidarity, rather than appeals to power, are what liberate us. That rather than, constantly licking the boots of the people stepping on our necks, hoping, if I disparage non-binary people as a binary trans person, then I will achieve the love of cis-normative society. That if I scab for the owner of this company, that I will be allowed to maintain my power, which is radical as a queer person. No matter how much you tell yourself that, you're going to have to step on other people of your community in order to get to that point. The only way to truly liberate people is to be with them and to take their struggles seriously and to not draw these weird arbitrary lines between marginalized people amidst class struggle, against struggle against police brutality, against workers' rights, against like the violence against trans women that's rampant. These are not these things that need to be mutually exclusive nor disconnected from conversations about class. But when it comes down to it, it comes down to a struggle in which this corporate entity views us not as, binary passing trans people, not passing non-binary people, queer people, wealthy queer people. Like, no, they view us all as these tokens that they can use in this giant marketing strategy that is the current climate of the world. Don't give them those easy points. I guess the point being that I can't guarantee that if you were to be a worker and walk out tomorrow, and not just worker, if you are in an abusive relationship and you were to walk out tomorrow, if you come out of the closet tomorrow, there's no guarantee that you will have even a majority of people on board. But you will have people who want to talk to you, who want to know you, who want to know what you've struggled with, and they want to help you. And I want our efforts here to be that. I don't want this to stop as a campaign, or at least it could have stopped a while ago with this, but Joel Kaminsky didn't want to. I don't want this to stop at just our demands. I don't want this just to stop at a union. I want this to be a movement for justice within sex-positive spaces, for justice within spaces that hire from vulnerable populations and then feed us to the feds, and then feed us to viruses. I want this to be a strong workers movement. I want this to be a trans movement. I want this to be a not specifically white or able-bodied movement. I want this to be something huge. I want this to be something that unifies shops all across the country behind a mission of you need to be held accountable when you put that damn sign in the window. You can't just put a yes on 3 sign in the window. You can't just put a we respect everybody's pronouns in the window and then tell us that we're doing things wrong when we come forward about sexual harassment, about sexual assault claims that are going up online, about COVID protections being lacking and abysmal, about human resources ignoring our needs. The brand, the company doesn't mean anything if you're being paid below a living wage. The brand doesn't mean anything if you are paid below a living wage. The brand doesn't mean anything if you feel unsafe in your workplace. The brand doesn't mean anything if your manager's manager treats you like anything less than a vitally important voice to have in that space. Your company should be grateful to have you as a marginalized voice, as somebody who can course correct them along the way. I didn't become a brand ambassador because, I felt like tossing around dildos and yelling. It was because I wanted to be a face of this company that is trans, unabashedly trans. I didn't teach workshops on trans femme identities because they're profitable. We are out here with an incredibly useful set of skills and knowledge. And if a company thinks that they can pick that up, use it, and then shelve it when it's not convenient for them, in this case, use my identity when it's good for marketing, use my workshops when it's good for marketing, but then the second I get noisy, put it right back. We need to be the ones who show them that they're wrong, that they can't do that, that they can't just pick and choose the aspects of marginalized identities that are useful to them, so that they can, put up their ads that feature like people of color, and, ads that have like queer people talking about, how great it is to work at Amazon or something like that. And then do nothing to amplify the voices of workers at that same business saying, oh, you really like to put up an image of like a Black person on your social media and then call the cops on striking workers.
Right.
The second that comes out, they're shutting down their Instagram comments. They're shutting down their mentions and saying, this isn't good for business. It's not good for business? A strike.
Yeah.
If we say that it's not. A union, a walkout, anything.
Yeah.
Speak up. Make that worse for business than them listening to your needs.
So I want to ask you 2 questions.
Sure.
Okay, the first one's easy. Where can people learn more about Sexy and how to help and participate? And then the second one, let's say Joel Kaminsky is listening right now. He says he's so stupid, and you're clearly very smart because I didn't even have to ask you any questions. You already answered everything on my list. So
I'm honored. Thank you.
He says he's so dumb. You're clearly very smart. What is your advice for Joel Kaminsky, who, he's a CEO, he doesn't want to be embarrassed by his CEO friends, and he wants to start making money again. So what is your advice to fit his agenda?
So first of all, secse.net. Sexy.net, it has a list of our demands. It has a support us tab where you can donate to our strike fund and sign our petition. Check out all of our social media pages. If you want to find us on social media, it's Stand With Sexy on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We post updates to, if we're doing a picket and we need bodies, which we always do. We'll post events on Facebook, any updates, any fun information. We're in the works of doing a little intro of me and kind of some backstory about me and some of the other strikers as well. Check it out on social media. And also, if you want to support us in a big way, go on Yelp, go on Google reviews, channel your inner Karen, because I know you want to. Because I know you want to. And rip this company to shreds. Give them a 1-star review and say, this place is beautiful. What it represents is wonderful. I want to have accessible, quality sex education, but I can't while they're ignoring their striking workers' demands.
Right.
Let people know what's going on. So when your local whoever looks up Good Vibes on Yelp, on Google reviews, things like that, they can see that and say, oh, and make that decision for themselves. Because the owner is counting on it. The owner, Joel Kaminsky, is saying, oh, whatever, a strike's a strike. People still want to spend money at my business. Ask yourself what you as a buyer would think if you saw their Yelp page, their Google reviews, their social media, and you saw the wonderful, powerful outcry that we've been able to channel about the company. As for Joel, if you think that you have anything other than one of the most talented staff of incredible, powerful voices and educators, you are dead wrong. And maybe you don't know. Maybe you don't know because you don't visit us enough. You don't know most of our names. Maybe you're just unaware of how committed your staff on the East Coast and on the West Coast as well are to this company. Then take this chance to learn. Because when we first walked out, I had a lot of sentiment, especially from the manager, expressed concerns that we would just run out of money and the business would just close and that resource would be denied to the queer community. If that was when my manager started to panic and despair, I started to panic and despair when people I had worked beside in this space for over 2 years started to say, I don't think I can stay here any longer. I don't think I can come back to this job once they recall me. You know, I've just endured so much trauma from sexual harassment, from improper COVID procedures, from this weird sort of tokenizing racism and transphobia, from this general just unempathic approach to workers' issues. That was when we began to feel real pain for the demise of this business. You may be feeling that fear now. You may be feeling that pain now, but we have been shouldering it for so long as we just watch our peers say, fuck this. I can't deal with this. I deserve better than this. I am telling you, Joel, you have brilliant people who want to work. We make money. We have people in the community who recognize our faces. We have turned away so many people who see us and say, I am so sad. Not that I can't buy stuff, that they would do this to you. I barely even need to explain what our demands are. And when I do, people say, I can't believe this. I can't believe that it's you too, that amidst this crisis, that even you, the queer, the trans sex educators of Good Vibrations in such a progressive space would endure this. And I would ask you, in honesty, whether you would rather be the guy who ignored his queer workers, his trans workers, his immunocompromised workers during a pandemic. He ignored their needs, endured this long social media campaign where the community was clear about its support for Sexy, and he still refused it up until the minute they all lost their jobs. You know, just left them out for a month, and they all just quit. Would you rather that be patient? Or would you rather be the dumbest guy in the company who made a mistake, who didn't listen enough, and who's willing to learn? This company started as a co-op. You're not exactly ruining your reputation, ruining your life by meeting with the same union reps that you've been meeting for how long now? You think you know what's best for us, and then you claim you're the dumbest person in the company. We're giving you an opportunity right now to be neither the malicious CEO or just a stupid guy. We're welcoming you to be the guy who listened. We're welcoming you to be the phase of Good Vibrations where the problems came up, because you know just as well as anyone, and if you don't know it, you're sure as hell about to, that this is not just an East Coast problem, that this is not just a COVID problem. You can be the guy who, when the problems came up to the surface, when the voices came out, that you heard them, that you were patient, that you were empathic, that you pushed back until you could understand us, that you were strong, that you were firm, but ultimately you were welcoming of our needs and concerns. You could be that CEO. And here's the thing. Maybe we don't trust in the company. Maybe we don't trust in the brand. Maybe nobody trusts in any brand or company. It is 2020, y'all. Maybe nobody trusts any CEO right now. But we don't need to trust you with all of our hearts. You're not our dad. We just need to believe in you this once. The community of Boston, of California, of the United States, of queer people, of trans people, of sex workers, of sex industry workers, we just need you to listen this once. We need the managers of every Good Vibes location to understand that you just need to listen this once. That you didn't need to be a part of this from the beginning. That you didn't need to, be exactly right every step of the way. But that you need to join us. That you need to listen to us. Walk out. Tell the managers that you believe us. That when we say there's a problem, that you believe us. You can be that CEO. You can be that manager. Or if you think that your silence, that your scabs will eventually just see us fade away, you and this brand will fade with us, and you know it. And that's not what any of us want. We want to educate. We want to teach. Hell, we want to sell your products. I sold one of your cowgirls. That's $1,500, and I sold that thing all on my own, off the floor, like a car salesperson. Just because we advocate for our rights doesn't mean we personally dislike you. Doesn't mean that we personally dislike anybody. This is a bigger issue. This is an unprecedented time. And do you really want, when people ask you, what did you do during the pandemic of 2020? What did you do during the COVID crisis? Do you really want to say, I busted a union, I busted a strike, I ignored my workers' needs, and they all just sat there getting sunburns, speaking out about my mistreatment of them? Or do you want it to be, it was an incredibly hard time to be a business owner, and it was a harder time to be a kind business owner, but I did it. I did the impossible. I listened to my employees' needs. Everybody who says, like being a landlord, being a CEO is a real job because you take risks, which is like, but here's a risk for you. Spend some money on our needs, meet our needs, recognize us as a union, let us do what we need to do to make this business what it can be, to make Good Vibrations the radical space of education, of liberation, of safety that it is meant to be, that Joni Blank wanted it to be, that the queer and trans people of these communities are shouting that they want it to be. I know you have the capacity to listen and make this change. I know you know what we want. Even if you say you're the dumbest guy in the company, you're not dumb. You're a smart guy, and you're a kind guy if you took this business over whatever soul-crushing deal you had before, likely. Made you a lot of money, but maybe didn't make you feel as proud as this business. Now is the time to make this company something you can be proud of.
If we were little foxes, would you come over my den? If we were piggies, would you play with me in my pen? If we were anteaters, I'd let you eat all of my ants. If we were little old people, I'd help you put on your pants. And if we were race horses, I'd always let you win. If we were kitties, I'd give up one of my lives so you'd have 10. If we were kitties, I'd do that for you. I'd do that for you. If we were kitties, yeah. And if we were puppies and you got hurt, I'd be there to lick your cuts. If we were fireflies, our love would light up our butts. But if we were kitties, I'd give up one of my lives so you'd have 10. If we were kitties,
Meow.